running to Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Greetings, everyone, to this week's episode of Breaking History. We got a lot planned for y'all today, and there's been a lot going on. We had Benjamin Netanyahu gave an insane speech. I don't know, it's like his seventh speech to the Congress with like 30 standing ovations, or 300 standing ovations, probably is more like it.
58 standing ovations in 52 minutes.
Wow, that's a high energy flux density of ovations.
That's a record, actually.
Wow.
And the previous record was 28 standing ovations in 48 minutes. That record was set in 2015 by Bibi Netanyahu.
Ooh, that's embarrassing. That's an embarrassing record. Okay, so we got that. We have an inflammation of provocations going on in the Middle East. Yet again, another upsurge. We had attacks. We don't know who caused them on a Druze village in the Golan Heights, which somehow is being used by the Israelis to justify the idea that they have to do counter assaults now on Hezbollah. And you have a bunch of things there. You've got tumultuous activity in Venezuela, which we'll talk about. We'll even talk about some of the infiltration. I've got a few thoughts that I was going to share last week, didn't have time. So we're going to discuss some elements of the Trojan horse infiltration of the Republican Party to subvert Trump's Agenda 47. That'll all be coming online today. Gordon, how you doing, man?
I'm great, man. It's been like you said, I can't believe it's only been a week because we haven't spoken since the Netanyahu speech, because I covered the Netanyahu speech right after Breaking History last week. So a lot's happened. My head has been mostly in that arena, Israel. That's what I've been mostly writing about in the brief. But I know that all these other things have been happening as well, Venezuela and everything. So interesting stuff, interesting times, man, crazy times.
Absolutely. So before we start unpacking and pulling the strings out of these Gordian knots that are tying up our times into crazy land, let's play a little ad from our sponsor, MyPillow.
You ask and we listen. We're finally bringing the most requested offer ever. Get the queen size premium MyPillow, now only $19.98. MyPillow is made with patented adjustable fill. It adjusts to your exact individual needs regardless of your sleep position. It helps keep your neck aligned and holds its shape all night long so you get the best sleep of your life. But that's not all. Get our 6-piece kitchen or bath towel sets, only $25. Our brand new mattress topper as low as $69.98. Get our famous MyPillow bed sheets for as low as $25 and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get huge discounts on all MyPillow products, including the premium queen size MyPillow, only $19.98. That's the lowest price ever. Don't delay, order today. From all of us here at MyPillow, thanks America!
All right. So that's a nice way to ease into today's discussion. Obviously, the fires are being lit heavy, as we were mentioning, in the Middle East. There was a counterattack to something that is really weird. I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts on what was behind the killing of these children in this Druze community in Israel. That resulted in a building getting hit in Lebanon, a general who was targeted not dying. We had a Hamas leader who's a billionaire getting killed in Iran, which I also find very weird. And all of this stems out of Netanyahu's desperate, strange antics in Washington just last week that I didn't catch your coverage, unfortunately. But what's your take on this stuff, man? How would you like to start this?
Yeah, we can absolutely start there. So I'm pulling up my my mind map,
sure,
so I can get that show with everyone. But yes, the speech last week pretty much went the way I expected it to go. Netanyahu didn't make any specific claims. I did write in the brief the next day that he effectively called for war with Iran, which I think is a fair extraction from that speech. He basically called for America to stand with Israel against Iran. which just means when the time comes for us to go to war with Iran, we expect you to stand with us. That was effectively what the speech was.
Right.
And most of it was just anecdotal evidence, pulling out surrogates, victim families, injured IDF soldiers who all looked very uncomfortable, by the way. And like you said, bipartisan standing ovations the entire time. So it was pretty wild. What's really interesting was we covered this on Badlands Daily on Monday. So some people listening, this will be a little bit of a refresher there, but I'll just share my screen real quick. So yeah, the optics meeting with Netanyahu on Monday. I noticed, this when he walks up to the door, he doesn't do the handshake. He does like the grabs him by the hand and kind of pulls him, shakes him back and forth. Very reminiscent of when MBS did the fist pump to Biden. Everyone made a really big deal about that. In that part of the world, Western Asia, it's not having the formal greeting, especially given the gravity of this meeting and all the animosity behind it. I think that's a big deal. And the optics here, I want to play something real quick. I don't know if you've ever seen this article. Before I get too deep into this. So this is an article from 2022. Trump obsesses over exact position of water glass and bizarre clip from a bombshell January 6th film. And so I'll just play this 1 minute clip and this might communicate some things.
Okay. Beautiful. Oh. I don't think you want to have the water in the picture, right? You can take it over. Yeah, put it over there, Nick.
Can I move this table as well?
Yeah, might as well take the table.
How are you?
Oh, good, very good, thank you. You know what you can do, Nick? Put the table back, because it's missing something. Put the table back and put the water on the table without the thing on top of it. Okay. How's that look? Go ahead, take it out. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, good.
Right, let's go.
Okay. So, yeah. So that's something that a lot of us saw in 2022, and we're like, okay, that makes perfect sense. It goes along with what I said last week about Trump being the producer of this major reality television program, basically. And I meant that in a very literal way, because he is that obsessive when it comes to optics. He's very, very, I think, mindful of the things he says. I think he says things like the blunders, quote unquote, that they used to make fun of him for in 2016, when he would say, we're going to build a wall, Mexico's going to pay for it. I think that was very intentional. He understood how that was going to be perceived by the media. They were going to mock him for it. But he said it because that empowered his enemies to unwittingly spread his message for him, which is how he spent $500 million versus Hillary's $1.2 billion or whatever it was in the campaign and still beat her. It's because he got his enemies to broadcast his message for him. He's very good at these kind of manipulations, and it's because he's mindful of optics. So going back to this meeting of last week, I read it on all the body language, just like we talked about with that video I shared last week with the meeting between him and Netanyahu in 2017. This first picture, right after he does the weird little handshake where he's not really formally greeting Bibi, you can tell from the other angle, from this angle, he actually kind of turns his back to Netanyahu, and Netanyahu, it's this really awkward kind of picture where it's almost like Trump is acting like he's taking a picture with Sarah without.
Are you showing an image right now?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to flip back this tab. Okay. So yeah, it's almost like he's turned his back. You look at where his toes are pointed, and it's almost like he's boxing out Bibi. There are other images like Bibi brought him these gifts. Total victory. Trump doesn't even make physical contact with him, let alone touch the gift. You would think he would put a hand on the gift, for the photo op. Bibi gives him a signed copy of his new autobiography. Trump is kind of almost just the look on his face there is too perfect. And And then most importantly, in my opinion, is the handshake. As I read about in the brief on Monday, there are a lot of body language experts out there who their literature was already out there before this meeting, but the literature was putting your hand under, like your left hand underneath a handshake is how you show support. Putting your hand over top of a handshake is like how you express dominance. Like that's what it says right here. It's considered disrespectful to put your left hand on top of the other person's right hand in a handshake. This is like body language 101 kind of stuff. And I'm sure Trump has probably been read on that given his history, his work history. And then finally, you compare the tie that he's wearing here to the tie that he wore with Abbas in 2017. To me, that's a signal. When you combine that with the letter that he put out on Truth Social the night before, the letter that Abbas had written to him that said, I'm praying for your well-being after the assassination attempt, and he hand wrote, "Everything will be good, don't worry." And he posted that online. He said, "I'm looking forward to my meeting with Bibi Netanyahu." And then he puts on this same tie. To me, man, I read deep into this stuff because I think going back to the image with the water, or the video with the water glass, I think it's very intentional. Like, I think Trump is being very intentional. There's another video that I'm not going to play because just for the sake of time, if you want to watch it, Badlands Daily, we watched it on Badlands Daily. CanCon brought it up, but it's the video during this meeting and what he does during this meeting. Number one, Melania is not there. Very telling to me that Netanyahu brought his wife. It was a smart move on Netanyahu's part. The wives kind of make things more casual, kind of lower the temperature in the room, their banner and all that. Trump does not bring Melania, even though he's hosting them at his house where Melania lives. He then seats Sarah Netanyahu next to him. And at the end, when he's fielding questions from the press, somebody asks, "What's your relationship with Bibi like, given all of the things you've said about him in the past few years?" And he's like, "Oh, my relationship's great. Like, we get along great. Like, it is what it is. Like, things happen, but, we have a great relationship." And then he says, "And at the end of the day," and he puts his arms around Sarah and he looks right at Netanyahu and he goes, "I have Sarah on my side. And I have Sarah." And he's like sitting there leaning in, like staring at Netanyahu. And it feels there's something very like Godfather-esque about the way that he is like. And Sarah Netanyahu, like the look on her face is just she looks very uncomfortable. Netanyahu looks very uncomfortable. It's not so much that he was like threatening Sarah. It's just the whole nature of it just felt very, very antithetical to the official narrative, which is that Trump and Netanyahu are like in league together. So, and then I circled this guy, Ron Dermer. We've talked about Ron Dermer many times before. He's the Minister of Strategic Affairs right here. Born in Miami, American citizen. Interestingly enough, in 1995, when he was enrolled at Oxford, he participated. He ran the polling and basically like put together the campaign strategy for this group, this newly formed political party in Israel of Russian immigrants who were basically connected to the Ukrainian mafia, like Ukrainian mafia, Israeli mafia. He helped them win election seats in 1995. They then joined Bibi Netanyahu's cabinet in 1996 when he becomes prime minister. And then Dermer becomes the Dan Scavino, like Netanyahu's Dan Scavino in the year 2000 when they're introduced. And he helps integrate this Russian, it's like a political party of Russian Jewish immigrants. So like Soviet Jews is what they call themselves, Rusophonics. And he integrates that party into the Likud party. They become part of the Likud party, and that ties right into the 2010 WikiLeaks post from Julian Assange, where there was concern expressed within the State Department. This woman in 2007 had run for a Knesset seat, won, and her uncle was the most powerful man in the Israeli mafia. The Ukrainian Israeli mafia is Ukrainian born. And so that just ties that's just another layer of like tying in like the connections between organized crime, like Ukraine and Israel. There's this organized crime element that is directly links Ukraine and Israel. And so what we had these past few days, interestingly enough, is a situation. I don't know if you heard about this, but basically the military police goes into an IDF base in Israel on allegations that the soldiers that were being tortured. And what they find is that one of these soldiers was brutally gang raped by a male prisoner was brutally gang raped by like 9 IDF guys.
Yeah.
And so they arrest all the IDF soldiers. They take them away. And then all of these radicals, these radical zealots that I've been talking about, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir, who we've talked about many, many times. They then storm the military base, 2 military bases, actually. They storm the military bases. He's there along with other members of the Knesset, Israeli lawmakers. They're attacking the military base. They're demanding the IDF, military police, release the prisoners, like release the arrested soldiers. That prisoner is then, like, the tortured prisoner is sent to the hospital, and the doctors come out, and the doctors are like, I've never seen anything like this. Like, this guy is in such bad shape. I can't believe IDF soldiers did this to this guy. And now you have Yoav Gallant, the defense minister, accusing Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, of basically curtailing the police response to the mob assault and basically allowing the mob to attack the IDF base. So you have a very real situation where, like, an internal civil war within Netanyahu's cabinet, because remember, you have Netanyahu's cabinet. This is the security cabinet of Israel, includes both Yoav Gallant and Itamar Ben-Gvir. And Ben-Gvir has been demanding for ever since Benny Gantz resigned and the war cabinet was abolished or dissolved. Ben-Gvir has been demanding that Netanyahu form a new war cabinet, which would be Netanyahu, Gallant, and Ben-Gvir, which would give Ben-Gvir exclusive voting powers on the war effort. So he could then vote for more war, because he wants war with Hezbollah, he wants war with Egypt, he wants war with Hamas, he wants war with everyone, because he wants greater Israel. And so in my mind, like this thing, I mean, you look at the headline here, this thing is really spun out of control. You have, here's a screenshot of Knesset lawmakers arguing in open meetings, public meetings, about the legitimacy of raping male prisoners. And you have members of the Knesset saying this is completely legitimate. These are subhuman. These people are subhuman. These Palestinians are subhuman. And anything you do to them, including
anything
in a rectum, this is what they're saying right here, is completely legitimate. Everything is legitimate. Like, we can do whatever we want to them. They're not human.
Yeah, I watched that video. That was sickening. And I watched that. I just found out about this whole assault and rape on these prisoners, and then it seems like the full power of the state came out supporting the right to actually rape and torture if you're doing it against infidels in the context of this absurd war. No, it's really, really over the top. But then this is happening. So on the one hand, we have a lot of our righteous indignation, rightfully, like, being inflamed by this. You also have this attack that Netanyahu had to, like, stop his tour of the United States and go back to prepare the onslaught, the retaliatory onslaught after this supposedly Hezbollah launched missile, which Hezbollah denies. Mm-hmm. I know that they denied it. Landed in northern Israel. In a village, killing a bunch of kids, and this is now the cause of, like, this new inflammation. How does this tie into that? Like, who do you think, who was behind that?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm suspicious about who's behind it. Obviously, we don't have enough data to say for certain. I'm very suspicious about who's behind it, and just so everyone understands, this is where the missile landed, in the Golan Heights. And so technically it's Syria, but it's just like Gaza. I mean, just like the West Bank, it's Israeli occupied. So the IDF has occupied the Golan Heights since 1967, since the 6-Day War. So the village that was struck was technically an Israeli settlement, but in Syria. So we don't know who struck it. Hezbollah is denying that it was them. And in my opinion, getting back to the first question, which was why was this billionaire leader of Hamas, like who was killed yesterday, why now? That would be my question: is why now? They always knew who this guy, where this guy was. They've been talking about this for months. They've been talking about going after him for months. So why now? Why not 6 months ago? Why not on October 8th? Why now? And my opinion is that they needed to change the narrative and change the news cycle. So they went ahead and struck him in order to get the news talking about that, as opposed to talking about that other situation that we just went through.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like that. Now that's a separate question from who attacked the Golan Heights, who sent the missiles into the Golan Heights. I mean, I'm very much of the opinion that October 7th was a false flag.
Yeah.
Whoever was actually behind it, the IDF, or at least leaders of the IDF, allowed it to happen.
Yeah.
Given their 7-hour response time.
Yeah.
So like, I do think that was a false flag. And so I think anything that happens from October 7th moving forward could also potentially be a false flag. And I keep that in my mind.
I do too. I lean towards that as well. But it's an interesting point. And I think that Ismail, forgot his last name, Haniyeh, one of the top controllers of Hamas, he's always been a very shady character to me. And I remember a few months ago, I did like a little bit of a background search, because he hasn't lived in Palestine and Gaza, even though he oversees Hamas. He has assets to his name valued at over $2.2 billion, which is an absurdly large number. You'd think a millionaire, maybe, but a billionaire, that's big. And he's been based in Qatar for years and years and years, along with several other leading controllers of Hamas. They're all billionaires. They're extracting, they get their money because they procure the revenues of the state, whatever revenues are there for taxes and other things, tariffs. Also the underground tunnels that are used for all sorts of black market activities, which is huge between Egypt and Gaza. You have to pay a lot of money along the way to pass goods in and out, mostly in, obviously. And he's got a huge graft, it seems to me, that just procures a big cut of all of those that money towards his coffers. So you got this guy playing a very strange role in this whole inside job of October 7th. All of a sudden now he's in Iran to celebrate the inauguration of the new president, who's just made some remarks about wanting to reconcile with the West. And I mean, he's a troubling character. I don't fully know where he stands fully. He's definitely not the kind of reliable character that I had recognized with Raisi. But this is where this guy dies, Haniyeh. And the first thought in my mind was, could this have been a backdoor decision to eliminate a troublesome character who's creating or accelerating a drive for nuclear war? Maybe. Or was it actually what some are saying, even in Iran, that this was an Israeli hit? Maybe. I don't know. What are your thoughts on some of this stuff?
Yeah, well, you bring up so many good points, and I'll remind everyone that as like that video that I shared, I think last week, of the Abbas video where I first detail it, and then we listen to Arafat and Abbas and Trump speak. As I show on the screen in the video, I'm not saying it, but it's being shown on the screen. When Egypt controlled Gaza, because Egypt, after the Nakba in 1948, Egypt controlled Gaza up until 1967, when the 6-Day War. That was when Israel took control of Gaza. Egypt did not allow the Muslim Brotherhood into Gaza anytime, and this was a policy I think that Nasser had, even in Egypt, it would seem. But anytime they caught even a philosopher, even like a Muslim Brotherhood philosopher, they'd hang him. They'd execute him or cut off his head, or whatever it is they do. They would execute him every single time. They had a zero tolerance policy for Muslim Brotherhood operatives in Gaza. And then when Israel takes over in 1967, they change that policy and they allow the Muslim Brotherhood to occupy Gaza. And then that's how Hamas is ultimately created in 1988 with the help of the Israeli government. And so I think it's important, whenever I say Muslim Brotherhood, I always whenever I write it in my writings, I always put afterwards in parentheses MI6, because I think it just goes without saying that we're talking about British intelligence. Every single time we talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, we're talking about British intelligence. That would explain why the Muslim Brotherhood leadership lives in Doha in penthouses and are billionaires. That's why Hamas leadership live in Doha in penthouses and are billionaires. And they live right alongside the CIA. CIA has a huge presence in Doha, as does MI6. Now that we've closed down Bagram in Afghanistan, the largest military base in the Middle East is in Qatar. So we have an enormous, the United States has an enormous military industrial complex presence in Qatar, living alongside the Muslim Brotherhood, living alongside Hamas. And all of those things should raise questions in everyone's mind is, how the hell is this, like what's the truth here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely.
And they could have eliminated this guy at any point in Qatar. They could have, like, Mossad could have gone in there and used in a clandestine operation, like took this guy out in like so many other ways than just sending him. I believe it was a missile strike, if I'm not mistaken, in Iran.
I don't even know. Yeah, I didn't even figure out what exactly was the official cause of his death. That wasn't clear to me at all. But his bodyguard as well got hit. Probably, yeah, missile would make sense, or car bomb. But yeah, if you can confirm that, or
I'm looking it up right now. But that's like in my opinion, that's a very public. That's a very, like, you're making a statement when you kill someone that way. Yeah. Just like when they took out Soleimani. It's like, right, you're making a statement. You're doing it when he's in Iran versus when he's in Qatar. Mm-hmm. It's like there's just the optics of that, I think, push the entire situation closer to war and closer to World War III.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, at a time when you have China that has been breaking the rules of the game by working to create reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas as well, which just happened last week. As a major breakthrough for the first time in years and years and years, do you have now a chance at getting some reconciliation and harmonious action? If Haniyeh was induced to support that procedure, that would make it likely, in my mind, that he could have maybe fallen off his script that he was meant to follow by being a catalyzer for this eschatological end times ritual. He might have fallen off script. Maybe he was given a deal he couldn't refuse and supported this reconciliation. Or maybe he was trying to sabotage it, right? This is another hypothesis that still has to be entertained. Maybe he was actually still working to get back onto the old Muslim Brotherhood script of forever war till this point of maximum catalyze or catalyzation. And maybe thus he had to be eliminated from the friendlies. I not sure, but I think the way that they're talking about it, when I go to Press TV, when I look at some of the messaging coming from Iran and from the eastern part of the world, or from Russia, they're currently they're pushing the view that Israel was behind it and that he was somebody who was doing the right thing at this moment. So that seems to be the consensus by parts of the world that are more sane than the part of the world we're living in.
Yeah.
So,
well, and just to follow up, all of the major propaganda outlets, meaning like the New York Times, are saying it's unclear how the killing was carried out. So,
right,
right now, the mainstream narrative, at least right now, is that they don't know how he was killed. My assumption would be it was a missile strike, but it would be even more strange if it was some other means, because again, I think that, like, they could, if they wanted to poison him or something like that, they could have done that in Qatar. Yeah. And the question to me is, like, if they really wanted him dead and he was so critical to this whole operation, why didn't they go after him on October 8th? Like, again, I think there's very specific reasons why they didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because he's working for them being the globalist deep state, whatever you want to call it.
Yep. That's the point. On that note, do you want to shift gears and discuss the Venezuela situation a little bit, or do you want to?
Sure. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think from what I'm seeing, as from a historical standpoint, and looking at some of the agencies and players in operation, I mean, I've been watching a lot of video footage of the protesters pushing to basically. There's a lot of pressure on the military to overthrow Maduro. There's a lot of violence all over Venezuela, and I've been watching a lot of the videos, and it is crazy violent. They lit a hospital on fire. It's like, why do you do that? Why light a hospital on fire? A lot of the narco gangs have been activated to also play a very big destabilizing role. These are, I mean, It's a very big problem amongst Latin American countries or narco terrorist gangs that are often used as proxies, the same way ISIS is in the Middle East as proxies for Western intelligence to destabilize, to do the dirty work. So there's a lot of that going on. And it does seem to me like it's a coup d'etat. I mean, I know that a lot of conservatives, a lot of my friends are saying, like, they're saying, yeah, look, Elon Musk is right. Maduro's got to go. He's a dictator. It's a communist dictator. It's good. It's a people's freedom movement behind what's her name? Maria Machado.
Yeah.
And her old weird Biden-like figure who's this billionaire Venezuelan guy who never says a word. He's just always kind of like shriveled up there next to her. Like, what? But it seems like there's been a bit of duplicity there. I think people have been duped into thinking this is a real revolution. Machado, I was just looking, somebody had sent me a link to her presentations at the National Endowment for Democracy. She's been a regular speaker at the NED for a number of years. Most recently in June 2024, she gave a speech at the National Endowment for Democracy, which is behind all of these color revolutions internationally. It's a CIA front.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And
she's the one who defeated him.
Well, that's the thing. See, the evidence that I'm seeing for the defeat of Maduro, according to the hard evidence, because I'm looking for where's the hard evidence? It's coming from primarily Edison polling, which is a US-based CIA front, which Ben Norton has done a deep dive on, going through what's behind Edison polling, which is being cited by Elon Musk. It's being cited by Machado as being the thing that has proven that the people don't want Maduro, that they must have voted otherwise than what we're being shown by the official agencies of the Venezuelan government. This is a CIA outfit that has created, I mean, polling has been since the days of George Gallup, just so people know. It's been a social engineering operation. So the way polling works is to modify and nudge our behavior. And we're told, hey, 80% of my fellow Americans believe we should be arrested for walking outside of our curfew. So I guess I should believe that too. And then people modify their opinions, or softer-minded people, of which there are too many, modify their opinions to what they think the mass popular opinion is, according to the polls. And then it becomes a Pygmalion effect, where they take on those opinions, and then when they start saying what their thoughts are, it's sort of it's a feedback loop. It's a cybernetic feedback loop.
For sure.
So the sourcing coming out of it is a bit weird. What do you got there? Maduro in Venezuela has been elected fair and square. There was no election. Yeah, that's right. And what they're drawing out right now, that graph was made up, by the way.
Yeah.
That's not a real.
Yeah. So this is the graph. This is the graphic that's gone viral across the internet, and they're like, look at the comparison to Georgia. At first glance, it's very compelling. Like, the graph is very compelling. But my question is, where did this data come from?
They made it up. That's a Photoshop graph.
On the left come from? Yeah.
Yeah. They created a meme to appeal to the psych profile of conservatives who have justifiably been very angry that there was a coup in America in 2020 using that very famous graph. And they just Photoshopped a new graph to appeal to the psych profile. And then that became a very foreseeable viral meme. That's a great speech you just pulled up there. That actually is where Maduro is calling out this whole deep state operation is the same thing that killed JFK.
Yeah. Look at this. I'm not going to play it, so I'm just kind of I'm scrubbing it right now just so people can see what he's saying, because it's all in Spanish, so it wouldn't matter listening to it. But he literally says, who killed JFK? The same people who tried to kill Donald Trump. I mean, he is speaking, saying things that I think what we have said on this show many, many times. Now, look. The way that I look at Maduro is, I don't know what Maduro is. I mean, what I know is that Venezuela seems to have suffered tremendously while he was in power. And, is that Gladio? Is that CIA? Was that all planned, or was that an earnest nationalist failing to implement communism? I don't know. But even if it's the former, even if he was a CIA puppet, and they've turned on him, and he realizes that now, and he's kind of fighting for his life, which is why he would say something like that, knowing what has happened to other CIA puppets in the past, this is something that like they do with Operation Gladio all the time, where they will overthrow their own government in order to make, for the optics, to make people think, like it happened in Iran in 1979. To make people think that, oh, your voice has been heard. You are now in like the power has been returned to the people. You can now, go back to sleep or turn your attention elsewhere. Like your grievances have been resolved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the thing with the economy of Venezuela, which is definitely in bad shape, if you look at it, a lot of this has everything to do with Western economic warfare, utilizing the power of the US dollar as a tool for sanctioning the IMF conditionalities and World Bank conditionalities that have not been permitting Venezuela to industrialize for decades. So you've got all of these artificial external forces working hard. And in the case here, this is a graph showcasing just some of the more devastating recent sanctions since 2016, where we could see that they went from their having almost 2,500 barrels per day of oil being produced. And it's an oil bastion, right? Like there's so much oil in Venezuela. It's wild. But that revenue that went for the sale of oils, all of a sudden you couldn't sell it when there's sanctions now, and all third parties who would normally purchase your oil are going to be sanctioned by the US. Now all of a sudden your sales market collapses, and you could just see how it collapsed after secondary sanctions, tertiary sanctions from 2017, 2019, then 2020 US imposes more sanctions on foreign oil partners. Meaning that, if you're a company that's working with another company, right? So it's not like you're buying directly oil from Venezuela, but if you're buying oil from a company that bought oil from Venezuela, you will also be sanctioned. Like you are isolating and decapitating or cutting the legs off of somebody, telling them to run a race, but you've just cut their legs off, and then you're attacking them for not being able to run the race. But it's like you hacked their legs off. And you could just see the collapse even when because George Bush even bragged, and Bolton played a role in this in at the beginning of 2003, they overthrew the Venezuelan government. It was a U.S.-run Gladio-style coup that installed for 4 days an opposition pro IMF dictator or government, and only lasted 4 days. The people of Venezuela organized and overthrew that Western puppet regime after 4 days, and you could just see the spike there, the collapse in oil production during that period. That Bush and Cheney were doing that with Bolton. And then they tried it again with Guaido in 2019. And that was overseen by Elliot Abrams, a hardcore neocon in 2019, who was there on the ground. Chrystia Freeland and the Canadian embassy were organizing. That was sort of like you had Jeffrey Pyatt in Ukraine organizing the Kievan Nazis, the Banderites, to overthrow the elected government of Ukraine in 2014. Well, that was the role of the Canadian embassy, working with also the U.S. Embassy in 2018, 2019 especially. And that was the time, too, that what's her name? I always forget her name. Maria Machado. She openly called in the end of 2018 for Benjamin Netanyahu and the U.S. military to come in and enforce freedom and democracy. So
And which country is this? Is this
Venezuela?
Venezuela. Wow.
Venezuela. Yeah.
Netanyahu of all people. Wow.
Yeah. She actually asked for military intervention to overthrow the government of Maduro in 2018, with a message directly to Benjamin Netanyahu and the U.S. military to do that. And all of these neocons around John Bolton, Elliot Abrams, who are these hard anti-Trump neocons, were infesting the Trump administration, controlling that entirely. And you had Trump in a tough situation as far as I was reading it on the ground at the time. Not on the ground, but as far as I was reading it from far away from the ground at the time, I think that Trump was trying to still project the idea that he's not losing control. So he had to use certain language that made it seem like he was for some of the things, like supporting Guaido, who was this Obama clone in Venezuela that was created out of nothing to be the new puppet stooge. That didn't work. Despite their efforts, Chrystia Freeland goes and creates the Lima Group, a Canadian-run Latin American agency, which is run by a Canadian. It's to try to consolidate all of the mass Latin American opinion against Venezuela specifically. And the same thing is happening now, where people hear, oh, but all of these Latin American countries all believe that Maduro lost the elections and it was fraud. And it's like, yeah, but look at them all. They're speaking through the voice of the Organization of American States.
Yeah.
It's based in Washington, D.C. That's the agency that they're speaking through. They're it's it is what it is. So
yeah,
as far as I see,
I'm not so yeah, it's like Malay. I'm not sold on Malay at all at this point. I mean, I still like Mike Benz right after he won put out a really great video where he kind of walked through how Malay might have ties to the IMF and how Argentina was the #1 debtor in the world of the IMF. And this might be the IMF coming in there. Basically, the year before Malay won, the Venezuelan Congress had passed a law saying nobody owes taxes this year. And meaning like we're not going to make any payments on our debt to the IMF.
Yeah.
And so Benz was saying this might like Malay might be their agent going in there to sell off assets. He put all the state assets up for sale. He's like, and then the IMF comes in using their proxies and they buy up all the assets. Now they literally own it of Venezuela potentially. And so I thought, like, I've been keeping that in mind the whole time watching Malay, and he makes moves like pulling out of BRICS was one of them, where it's like, okay, that seems like a pro IMF move.
Yeah, no, he's doing everything that Pinochet had done back in the early 70s when Kissinger and George Shultz put Pinochet in power in Chile. That's the full template. It was advised by, and again, unreconstructed Nazis. Argentina was their entry point. Bormann, all of these like worst of the SS high elite were all brought into Argentina. That's where they say Hitler lived out his long years into the 60s, was in these Nazi bases in Argentina. And I think that there's something to that.
Me too. Me too. I think there might be something to that too.
This is what the Jesuits organized. It was one of their core rallying points, which is where Bergoglio was the bishop, the Jesuit bishop, working with the fascists in the 70s in Argentina, helping to oversee the murder of his fellow lower level Jesuits who were just like fighting with the peasants against IMF and World Bank run corporate agencies that were acting like the government. Anyway, Argentina's got problems. All of these Latin American states have huge, like you said, Gladio problems, huge. And exactly what Milei has done by mass privatizing, mass cutting of social programs, their inflation is 260% in Argentina, but we attack Venezuela for having the crap economy, which we've made crappy, we've sabotaged it, but their inflation is 60%. Argentina is 260%. It's a fraction. And on top of that, if you look at Maria Machado's policy, it is the Malay policy. It's exactly what her masters want from the IMF. Privatize everything, make money, pay your debts, pay the speculators, open up the free markets so that you get rid of protectionism. You get rid of the idea of a national banking or a national sovereign economy. You just get rid of that. You have these private, financiers take control of the economy. That's exactly what she wants to do. She's explicit about that. That's what's been done all over these countries. And I think this also gets at the issue of the Trojan horse within the Republican Party, because Trump, when he gave his speech at the Republican National Convention, he did a big defense of William McKinley. And that's so important because he's really intervening on a big chunk of the Republicans who have been induced to hate protectionism. They hate McKinley. They think of him as a Lincoln tyrant style, working with the big business to take our freedom away using protectionism and state credit. And Trump made a very clear intervention saying, no, you've been lied to. McKinley is the tradition. That's the real roots of the Republican Party. He gave a previous speech on Lincoln saying we have to bring in the Lincoln traditions of the Republican Party again. And he was very clear on what that means. And this is, I think, because that's what McKinley did with the McKinley tariff. That's what allowed for America to grow vastly an industrial base that was able to withstand the assaults of foreign financial centers like in the city of London, or the dumping of cheap goods that London was able to do to undermine our local manufacturing. You need a protective tariff to overcome that as a weapon.
Yep.
So Trump, I don't know if this is a good time for me to go into the whole.
For sure. And just so people are tracking what we're saying here, just think of it like this. There's been a lot of like narratives out there about like China buying up all the farmland in America, right? So if you find that concerning about any foreign government or any foreign entity coming in and buying up all the real estate in America, whether it's China or BlackRock or whoever, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the idea that that Republicans over the past 20, 30 years have been induced to believe that like any regulation, any sort of government tariff to stop that from happening is akin to communism or is akin to socialism. And that's not true. That is corporate oligarchs. That is globalist oligarchs trying to trick you into saying, lower all of your defenses so we can come in and buy your house out from underneath you. And there's nothing you can do to stop us because we have more money than you do, more resources than you do, and better lawyers than you could ever hire.
Yeah.
So we will take it from you. And then when you sue us for it, we will beat you in court.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about here.
Exactly. That's great. Yeah, that's a very important point of clarity. And it doesn't mean that free markets are bad. It's just that you have to deal with the political reality of this oligarchical agency that has hyper monopolized, centralized power above nation states to screw everybody over. You got to deal with that through a political fight first. And then once you get a human civilization of honest humans being more normally honest, free markets are great. It's good competition is fine, but you got to deal with the political fight first. Right?
Yeah.
Swimming is great, but you got to get out of the water with the sharks.
And then bringing it and selling it for nothing in America. It's like, we'd rather just make it in America, pay a little more for it, but then everyone has a higher standard of living.
Exactly. Yeah. That used to be better understood. We've forgotten how this works. So I got a few slides. And I know that you've observed something with the Heritage Foundation too, and specifically Project 2025. That's going to come into very important play in what I'm about to say.
Perfect.
But yeah, the slideshow is just dealing with the conservative Trojan horses that I want people to really just be aware of, because there is a push to amplify the disgusting occultism on so many levels and immorality of the left and the insanity, right, of massive weaponized immigration, all of these things. There is an effort to capture the emotions of especially Christians and radicalize them to an opposite reactionary extreme. That's been done again and again. That's what was done to the Germans before World War II, is you work these emotions. So we're being played again. People have to be aware. I think Trump is very, very sensitive to this, but a lot of people around him that he needs are not. So right. So this is a little TNR article on William McKinley as the inspiration for Trump. And they're like, no, this is a bad idea. This is terrible. We got to get rid of this. Trump just said, for those who didn't actually know the speech earlier, he said that the Republican Party, the party of Abraham Lincoln, goes forward, united, determined, and ready to welcome millions of Democrats, independents, and anyone who believes in the greatness of America and the righteous heart of the American people. And then in 2017, that was a 2019 speech. In 2017, he said, in Kentucky, he described the American model and said, this is the system our founding fathers wanted. The greatest American leaders, including George Washington, Hamilton, Jackson, Lincoln, they all agreed that for America to be a strong nation, it must be a great manufacturing nation. And that, I think, is really getting at the essential fight historically that people overlook how that works. Because we have this thing called Project 2025, which has just sort of come out of the Heritage Foundation kind of recently. And there's obviously a huge effort to infiltrate this into the Trump policy paradigm that was already done very, very cogently. I've read through and watched the videos for Agenda 47, which is the official Trump program for what to do in a new, if he should become president again. And it's solid. Agenda 2047 is solid. So, and it's comprehensive. There are some overlaps. There are things within Project 2025 that are attractive as far as dealing with the immigration crisis, certain common sense things on gender manipulation of children in schools, like certain common sense things you would be foolish to disagree with, but it's already all there implicitly or explicitly in Agenda 47. So the question is, what's going on here? And I know you observed something very recently about somebody who made some reference to Project 2025. What was that again that you were telling me?
Yes, let me share my screen on the statement, and I'll see if I was trying to pull the original statement from Truth Social, but I'll just share the one that's on. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So Molly Hemingway, who a lot of people are going to recognize this name. She's like a Fox News contributor, been very pro-Trump this whole time. And people, have really liked her stuff because she's been very pro-MAGA, pro-Trump. So I'll look at the statement first, and then we'll look at her comments. But she shared or screenshotted an official Trump campaign talking point from yesterday that says, Trump campaign statement on Project 2025's demise. President Trump's campaign has been very clear for over a year that Project 2025 had nothing to do with the campaign, did not speak for the campaign, and should not be associated with the campaign or the president in any way. And then I'll just read this next part because Molly Hemingway then follows up and says, second paragraph, which I wish I hadn't cut off here, reads, quote, reports of Project 2025's demise would be greatly welcomed and should serve as notice to anyone or any group trying to misrepresent their influence with President Trump and his campaign. It will not end well for you.
Good.
Yeah. And so her comment is like screenshotting this is Trump world bows down to left-wing media lies and keeps signaling that he doesn't want his most loyal foot soldiers who kept with him even when very few others did or their conservative ideas in his next administration interesting. And so I want everyone to understand that I blasted her for saying this because I was like, this is ridiculous. This is Fox News in the establishment, like the neocon RNC speaking through Molly Hemingway, because there are like 145 people or whatever affiliated with Project 2025. And a lot of them are names you're going to recognize, names from the first administration. And what she's saying is that Trump is leaning into what the left-wing media is saying, where that Trump is nothing to do with this. And what they're trying to do, what this Project 2025 thing is, and what Matt, I think, is about to say is this Trojan horse idea is that they're trying to impose this on Trump. They're trying to put it out there as if it's part of Trump's campaign. So people rally around it, and then people organically kind of say, this is awesome. This is amazing. These talking points are exactly what we want. And then that kind of like ties Trump's hands. Like he kind of has to adopt it at that point because it becomes so popular among his base. And that's why you would take this strategy. But I digress. I pass it back to you.
No, that's perfect. And that's, I think, exactly what they want to do. They want to create an audience capture where Trump feels, because it's still a democracy. Like you can't do whatever within a republic. And so they want to put so much popular pressure on him. Like what I was saying with the Gallup poll thing, right? They work through adaptation of weak-minded people to popular opinion, utilizing the control of polls that people all of a sudden want to start taking on the opinions of what the Joneses next door have, or what they're being told by the newspapers all of their friends are supposed to have. And then they modify their behavior. It's behaviorism in accordance with this nudging that gets the predetermined outcome. And it only works for soft-minded people. Now, Trump has demonstrated that he is not soft-minded, but he's still only so strong as a political leader who does require the support of constituencies. That is, I think, what they're trying to hammer at. So it's great that Trump has made such a very clear differentiation between what his position is and what this thing is. And I was going to say, like, the thing when you read through the Agenda 247 paradigm, the policy specifics and the general philosophy of how it all weaves together, it's very, very much based upon reviving manufacturing, utilizing protectionism, having a solid vision with building new advanced cities over the coming years ahead. Like, we need to build cities again. We stopped doing that generations ago. China's building cities. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, they're building cities, and you can see how it works. It's beautiful. We don't do that. So it's very much based upon, it's not exclusive. It's based upon the focus on getting Americans to work together out beyond political boundary conditions. So that's why Trump was saying, look, we invite all Democrats and independents even to join us in this revival of Lincoln's fight. So very clear. Whereas the Project 2025, which does come out of the Heritage Foundation, which itself, I'm going to say a few words about, was created in the late 70s by some people who are very shady, and I'm going to show some of who they are. It's reviving the unitary executive theory. So the legal scholars at the Heritage Foundation are believers who are promoting this of the unitary executive. This, for those who don't know, and also is based, if you read the Project 25, on absolute free markets, a lot like they're anti-protectionism. It doesn't allow for any actual manufacturing. They say the word, we like manufacturing, but they're anti-protective tariff. They will not allow for manufacturing to happen. So it doesn't matter what your opinions are about it. It won't happen.
Yeah. Because you can't compete with slave labor from the
Never.
third world. Yeah.
Not a chance.
Mhm.
And it's also like, it allows for, or it even encourages too much of what the unitary executive theory was designed to do in Germany when it was developed by Carl Schmitt, the Nazi crown jurist. He's the inventor of the unitary executive as far as legal, a legal line philosophy on how to identify the justification of the utilization of centralized power, especially applied for a time of crisis, which is where the enabling acts of Hitler were applied, justifying themselves in 1933 by the unitary executive theory, which was based on the idea that when you're in a crisis, as the Reichstag fire of 1933, which was an inside job done by the SS, blamed on the communists and Poles and Jews, but it was an inside job, as we've proven. But that was done. That creates a crisis, like 9/11 was, that then justifies the implementation. Originally, Cheney had done this under when him and Elliot Abrams and John Bolton were running the show. They did this under the Patriot Act, which was directly a modified version of what Joe Biden had tried to do in response to the Oklahoma bombing in 95 or 94, which is taking word for word, as Ashcroft said, of Biden's Patriot Act, which itself had the unitary executive behind it as far as mass surveillance, the rights to arrest people with no habeas corpus, the rights to circumvent the constitutional protections of the citizenry. You can just get rid of all of that in a crisis. And America's been under a state of emergency for 24 years straight since 9/11. Every time it just revives and reauthorizes the unitary executive theory already implicitly there. But again, Carl Schmitt was the inventor of this thing. Now, the Nazi program didn't work at a certain point, right? So, oh yeah, that's the other thing. But it didn't work, so they had to recalibrate things. And we've talked about Gladio a lot. We've talked about how the Nazis were given new assignments after World War II, and how there's been an effort to infiltrate nations utilizing agencies like the Fabian Society, a nominally socialist. John Maynard Keynes was a Fabian. It's a nominally socialist imperial agency, which is, I would say, behind the Great Reset philosophy in general of you'll own nothing, we'll all be equal. It's behind the whole wokest theory in our education system. And then on the other hand, you had the Roundtable movement that was behind the growth of fascism and especially Nazism. Anyway, of Lord Milner. It was behind the creation of the state of Israel. It was like, that's what Lord Balfour was a member of. Milner, Lloyd George were all part of the Roundtable movement. And they worked together, these two agencies. One of them seated the Council on Foreign Relations in America as the branch of the Roundtable in America. And after World War II, they worked together to contaminate or infiltrate the left and the right inside of America itself, starting in the 50s. And we saw that the Democratic Party of JFK fell under the sway of these Fabian Keynesians after JFK and his brother were murdered. We saw the same thing happening with the Republicans that lost their Lincoln heritage as the Austrian school was infused into them, led by the followers of Friedrich von Hayek. And just to show here, the Heritage Foundation. So what they're doing here, they're seated by a grouping known as the Mont Pelerin Society. And the Mont Pelerin Society was founded by Friedrich von Hayek in 1947. And it had among its members Fabian socialists and Austrian libertarians. Right? So people who you would think are on the opposite poles of the world are actually co-creating this. Like, for example, you have Walter Lippmann, who's a Fabian socialist, who's a leading member of the Mont Pelerin Society with von Hayek. You have the teachers Frank Knight and Henry Simmons, who taught Milton Friedman. George Soros's mentor, Karl Popper, who created open society theory, is a member. Ludwig von Mises, Sir John Clapham. A lot of these are British, actually. In the 60s and 70s, you have Otto von Habsburg managing this thing as the head of it. You have Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi managing it, who's running Pan-Europa, the pan-European fascist movement that created the European Union. You have Max von Thurn und Taxis, whose daughter currently is the biggest patron of Steve Bannon, who's like offered one of her castles to be the gladiator training center for the Bannon new alt-right that is supposed to be sort of a mirror image counterparty to the Soros open society zombies, but now for Christians. And that's being given to Bannon by the daughter of Max Taxis, who herself is a member of the Knights of Malta. So you have this whole thing that's been, as H.G. Wells, a leading Fabian, had said, we can get international world government through socialism or through capitalism. If we do it right, it doesn't matter because we can get them to converge.
Exactly.
That's literally what H.G. Wells had said. And you could see that with people like Friedrich von Hayek here on the right and Keynes, who were lifelong friends. They were both for world government, and actually have a thing here where, and they were both creating a highly publicized debate out of the London School of Economics, a Fabian Society agency in 1932, that told everybody that in the middle of the Depression, that if you want to deal with the Depression, you can either be a free market, privatize everything Keynesian, not Keynesian, scratch that, von Hayekian, an Austrian school thinker who's a follower of the Habsburg Austrian school. That's what the Austrian school was. They were the retainers of the Austrian Habsburg Empire. That's where the whole thing came out of. Or you could do it the way the British socialists want, following Keynes, which is centralized government, make work, just, this other thing. Both of them, again, were enemies of the thinking of Lincoln, of McKinley, at the time it was being revived, ironically, by Franklin Roosevelt, who was not a Keynesian. He was anti-Keynesian. Keynes hated him. He hated Keynes. He was a follower of Lincoln. That's what he revived with his protective policies, his protectionism of the 30s. It was the first time it was done. It was broken from the Hoover and Coolidge administrations that were all speculation, free market, everything. He broke away from that, and then he revived Lincoln's greenbacks in the form of the Reconstruction Finance Corporation that emitted half of the currency in circulation by World War II, was through loans being emitted by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which was acting like a national bank, seeding smaller corporations, giving loans to private companies and entrepreneurs to build the big projects like the Tennessee Valley Authority, the rural electrification. All of these things would have been impossible if the theories of Keynes or of von Hayek were applied. And I said something before about how von Hayek, a lover of freedom, Nobel Prize winner, was for world government. He actually said, literally at the end of Road to Serfdom, that there must be a power which can restrain the different nations from acting harmful to their neighbors, a set of rules which define what a state may do, an authority capable of enforcing these rules. The powers which such an authority would need are mainly of a negative kind. It must evolve, so you can only punish, right? It has to be like an authority that could punish all the nations on the world for disobeying rules. It must above all be able to say no to all sorts of restrictive measures, protectionism. And so that's what we're saying. It has to be able to say to states, no, you can't use restrictive measures. That is protectionism, or anything which involves capital controls, nationalization, anything which is restricting the absolute freedom of license of the markets. The need is for an international political authority which, without power to direct the different people what they must do, so it can't tell them what they must do positively, but it must be able to restrain them from action which will damage others. So anything like protectionism will hurt, as in his theory, everybody else if anybody does protectionism. An international authority which effectively limits the powers of the state above the individual will be one of the best safeguards for peace. Okay, who's controlling that authority, that international authority, right? Who's gonna be the selected guardians? Are the people gonna vote? Like, what is it? Is it looking like the European Union? Is that more like it? And then if you look at it, again, he was working with the Habsburgs. So as an Austrian school, Coudenhove Kalergi, Otto von Habsburg, who has claims in some way to the blood of Jesus that he believes is his right as the Holy Roman Empire sort of heir. He created a bunch of agencies. They were working with Walter Lippmann down there. Hjalmar Schacht was a member of the Pan-Europa. There's a bunch. Financier Max Warburg,
Warburg, who's somebody that nobody ever talks about, but the wealthiest family in Europe is the Warburgs, and nobody ever wealthier than the Rothschilds. Nobody ever talks about them.
Yeah, no, they're huge. So you got all of these creeps working together. And by the way, Friedrich von Hayek also supports population control, even though people say, oh, he would never do that. He did it in 1981, where he said over the next 20 years, the world population is expected to double again. For a world that is founded on egalitarian ideas, the problem of overpopulation is unsolvable. If we guarantee that everyone who is born will be supported, we will soon no longer be able to fulfill that promise, since growth will outstrip resources. There is only one break for overpopulation, namely that the only ones who may survive and procreate are those who can support themselves. So you have to just basically any type of people who rely in any way on state support for paying for their bills or anything, they should just cut it off. It's basically social Darwinism. Let the weak die out. And it's like, even if they didn't create their situation, some people, bad things happen to them and they need some state support at times, like it happened. Yeah. Like all the people who lived in Michigan or who live in Michigan who once had good jobs saw their jobs being extracted and sent to cheap labor companies in China. All of a sudden they don't have jobs, they're qualified, they want to work, but now if they're going to feed their kids, if there's no social safety net of some sort, they won't feed their kids, So this is one thing to keep in mind. The Coudenhove-Kalergi, just to make it visceral for people, because they think of Europe as a liberal institution. He designed his design for the European Union was based on a Templar cross inside of an Apollo sun, for the specific reason of reviving a Templar Christian ethos that he loved, with the God-man, Pope or holy man or holy emperor type of character. He loved that Napoleonic type of strong man that only fascism can kind of give you. That's what he wanted to bring in. And he designed the flag. He added some stars around it. And eventually when they selected the flag, they basically removed the very overtly occult part that he wanted and kept the stars. But it is all implicitly there for those who know. Otto von Habsburg was his protege. Yeah, the protege of Coudenhove-Kalergi was Otto von Habsburg. Otto von Habsburg ran Pan-Europa all the way up until 2011 when he died, after Coudenhove-Kalergi dies. So he's the heir of it. He runs it. He also runs and creates the Dignitas Humanitas think tank based out of this Tristuli monastery in Italy, which has as its spokesman Steve Bannon. So Steve Bannon has been made, through Jesuit-trained Steve Bannon, has been made the head of the Dignitas Humanitas Institute out of this monastery, working with the heiress of the Thurnum Taxis family, which itself is a Venetian family, very, very old blood here, old money. And, this guy came out in an interview saying that in 2016, I'm a Leninist. Bannon proudly proclaimed. Shocked, the interviewer asks him what he meant. Lenin wanted to destroy the state, and that's my goal too. I want to bring everything crashing down and destroy all of today's establishment. We need 20,000 shock troops to take over the government. So he's like literally calling for a radicalized pro-Mithraic Templar Christian warrior class of reactionaries to take control of things. And these guys are part of this opus. Like there's this thing that the Heritage Foundation. So just to be quick, the Heritage Foundation works. It was seeded by the Mont Pelerin Society, founded by von Hayek and a bunch of Keynesians. It works in conjunction with the Cato Institute, the Reason Foundation. They're behind the shutting down, ironically, being done by Biden, of all of NASA's frontier projects. They're all being cut to save money. Like the Lunar Rover project has just been cut. This is from their 1981, what's called the Mandate for Leadership series. This was created to infiltrate the Reagan administration. So they were created in 1978 to infiltrate the oncoming Reagan administration. And Reagan, it was clear, was an anti-Malthusian. He had a tendency towards supporting a revival of FDR and Lincoln's policies. And so they had to flood the realm, flood the zone with all of these heritage agents calling for, no, we need more von Hayek. We need, and that was what it became Reaganomics. They were also doing this with Thatcher at the same time. That was what Mont Pelerin Society was, the society that ran Thatcher and Thatcherism, the deregulation of the banks, the mass privatization of everything. And the guy who was the first director of it, who's today the leader of the Brookings Institute, he's a director of Brookings, is this fellow Stuart Butler, a Mont Pelerin Fabian, who seeds this thing in America. He's the director, and he says that when he gives an interview on why we created the Heritage Foundation in I think it was 1979, he said it is time to inculcate America with British ideas.
Wow.
Yeah. And he says here, my proposals are not intended to be a politically exclusive idea. I believe it would be worthwhile ensuring that part of any enterprise zone could be available to non-commercial groups who wished, for example, to establish experimental workers' cooperatives. If the Socialist Workers' Party wanted a part of an enterprise zone to themselves, well, why not? So he's basically saying to all of the socialists, like, hey, we can all just synergistically like work together here, and we'll have these. And this is what they really have been fighting to bring into play, are these small mini micro economies, like what they were promoting for Hong Kong, or for the Rockefellers in the 80s were promoting this for China, saying that, no, you should just have little free enterprise zones on your coast where you'll have like some manufacturing for cheap labor, for exports. We'll open up for speculation. You'll make money with money. But no major visionary projects permitted. No. Just keep it in local, tiny little islands of microeconomies, and one can try communism, have just a commune. No, and another one could try it another way. But the idea is divide to conquer. That's always what these guys want: is keep things small, divided. You can't form a nation state. You can't form a cohesive plan. And if you could just infiltrate this toxic ideology into the West, you can really create a mess. And the last slide I'll just show here is this character he formerly ran the Catholic Information Center in Washington, D.C. And this is a big problem because it's tied to the Knights of Malta. And it's been infiltrating and trying to basically create this mystic Catholic Christian revivalism of fanatic Templars, like New Crusaders. That's what they've been trying to nudge the Christian movement into a Crusader mindset now for many decades. Not Benny Hinn, what's his name? The televangelist who's pushing for bombing Iran, John Hagee. So you got characters like John Hagee who are created out of this thing, catering to the Protestant side of things, but it's all about the psychology of weaponizing Christians who normally are very peaceful people, and they want to get everybody into this reactionary, gotta go fight evil, go fight seek monsters to destroy, fight evil, but not use the mind to understand what is real evil, what is the fake evil, what is this evil that you want to destroy. So it's very much a weaponization of Christians. Now this guy, because the idea is always civil war. They want to revive the Civil War plan that failed in the 1860s. That's what they've been trying to get back. That's what's online right now. Now, this guy, Father McCloskey, who is an Opus Dei priest, there's certain people I don't even want to talk about in the present day who run this thing, but people should look into them. He said here, describing in an interview in 2003 of his belief in the need for a relatively bloodless civil war, which would result in the Catholic Church purified of all dissent and religious dismemberment of the United States, where he says, there are two questions there, says the Reverend, smiling. One is, do I think it would be better that way? No. Do I think it's possible? Do I think it's possible for someone who believes in the sanctity of marriage, the sanctity of life, the sanctity of family, over a period of time to choose to survive with people who think it's okay to kill women and children, or for, quote, homosexual couples to exist and be recognized? No, I don't think that's possible. I don't know how it's going to work itself out, but I know it's not possible. And my hope and prayer is that it does not end in violence. But unfortunately, in the past, these types of things have tended to end this way. If American Catholics feel that's troubling, let them. I don't feel it's troubling at all. And in this interview, he's describing actually the need for redemptive civil war. He's going on and describing how this is actually something that would be a healing thing. And that there's no way to use reason or find like the idea of transforming people by giving them a vision for the future that they can participate in awakened qualities within themselves that would make them better people and more reasonable and thus more capable of overcoming their baggage. Like in the case with the Israelis versus Palestinians, the only way you can ever have a peace is if you build projects that are focused on the next generation. And there's been so much effort to withhold any kind of forward-thinking project that could create that peace in order to keep people living with all of the aggression and pain of injustices and eye for an eye, revengeism, that's forever war stuff. That's what they want in the Antifa versus Christian movements here as well. But no, the Heritage Foundation, all of these guys, they're anti-nation state. That's the key thing. That's what Tucker Carlson came out of. His first job was incubated through the Heritage Foundation before he was seated into Fox.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I would say that's part of the Trojan horse thing.
Man, that was an excellent presentation. Yeah, and just to kind of connect some dots and reinforce some of the things you said. So think about like what McCloskey was just describing there was really what's happening in Gaza right now, where he's saying bloodlust will be the catharsis that you're looking for. Like when we get to even though he's saying a bloodless coup, he's saying that once we get the satisfaction of this overthrow, this revolution, that will then bring about the catharsis that you are all seeking, which in my opinion is very antithetical to like the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of the Bible. I feel like that is completely incongruent with what the Bible says. So it's interesting to see a priest talking like that. Even though he is claiming to say the word bloodless, I think the subtext there is
relative. He said relatively bloodless.
Relatively bloodless, yeah. So I think the subtext there is very obvious, where it's like we are going to take out all of our aggression on our enemies and hang everybody and do a French Revolution 2.0, and that's going to give us the catharsis we're seeking. And I'm not saying that there shouldn't be punitive resolution in the form of military tribunals, like people on trial for treason, all that good stuff. Yes,
I'm okay with that too. I think some people should be hung.
Yes, exactly. There is a balance though. There is a balance to that, and I think it's important to point out that, like Bannon's quote, like when Bannon says, "I'm a Leninist," I completely disagree with that. But the second part he says, where I want to completely destroy the establishment, I think that speaks to what a lot of us feel, that the establishment, as at least it's being presented by Steve Bannon, is the thing standing in the way of us in a prosperous future. So it's very ambiguous as to what he's talking about when he predicates it with "I'm a Leninist." That does give me a little bit of pause. Like, wait a minute, like I'm not a Leninist. Like I definitely don't agree with Lenin on that stuff. Very interesting. So I would just say that it's really important to understand that when they can see ahead, and when by they I mean the oligarchs trying to subjugate humanity, when they can see ahead and they see this movement forming, the best way to defeat a revolution is to lead it, is to put people in place that have adopted those ideas and are espousing those ideas, and then they can be the Pied Piper to lead the revolution back into the slaughterhouse, which we've seen happen time and time again. Kind of goes back to the Venezuela discussion we just had about like overthrowing your own government. You're in a puppet state. Right. So it also makes sense to me that, that when it comes to the Heritage Foundation, which I haven't done the deep dive on, so I don't have a fully formed opinion on it. There are names that come out of that list of people who support Project 2025, where you would see those names and be like, well, those seem like patriots. Those seem like good, earnest patriots. And to me, it makes sense that you would recruit good, earnest people to join something like the Heritage Foundation, because you want to capture them and you want to indoctrinate them with your ideas, and you want to turn them against, even if it's unwittingly, against the good-natured movement that they're a part of, just like they did in the French Revolution. And
very good. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I think we should be careful just looking at this stuff. We should be very careful about seeing that somebody is affiliated with the Heritage Foundation or any other thing and immediately assuming they're a good guy or a bad guy. Yeah. I think you should just take them at their word, like judge them by their actions, judge them by how they handle narratives as they unfold. For example, if they're coming out like Molly Hemingway and attacking Trump because because all he's saying is, look, I had nothing to do with this Project 2025 thing.
Yeah.
Like, it has nothing to do with my campaign, and it's not my agenda. Like even if I agree with a lot of it, it's not my agenda. I didn't put it out. If the response to that by Heritage Foundation people is, well, Donald Trump is obviously like betraying MAGA and he can't be trusted, that's pretty nefarious. Like, I would then like side eye them and be like, all right, you're now going on my list of people I can't trust anymore.
Yeah.
But there probably are people in the Heritage Foundation who look at Trump and say, okay, fine, then you don't want to be a part of it, and then let's move into Agenda 47. And if that's their attitude, then okay, then
exactly,
we can work with you. So
exactly, yes. And I think that a lot of founding fathers didn't. I know they didn't agree on the Constitution. They didn't agree in the final wording of the Declaration of Independence. But there was like an agreement at a certain point that, okay, I'll let my ego go. I'll make some compromises because we all have to make this thing happen. So I'm sure that you're right. The majority of people involved with things like a Heritage Foundation are honest patriots. They just simply don't either understand some of their own epistemological blind spots that allow them to be very influenced by the arguments by a certain clique that would like to subvert the type of program that Trump is. Again, I looked at the Agenda 47 thing pretty thoroughly, and it's all there. Like, if you want to save the nation, if you want to end the forever wars, you want to create a basis of a viable recovery, it's there. The Project 2025 is superfluous. There's no reason for that to have been created.
That's the word, superfluous. It's unnecessary.
Yeah. And in fact, when you know things from the standpoint of like how any infrastructure, how the nation has ever been built up throughout the last centuries, if you know anything about that, you could actually start seeing that the Project 2025 is actually not only superfluous, but it's actually destructive by banning the use of protectionism, by just doing these things that seem mechanical or simple or little. It's actually hyper destructive if you make that part of your program. Or the ideology also of, I think, vectoring the United States identity of conservatives against China, against Venezuela, against even like you now have, I'm getting this more and more loud, is a consensus being nudged among better Christians to support the idea of militarily invading Mexico to restore moral order on the border. And, dealing with it also brings in the fentanyl, how we've been told to interpret the fentanyl thing being shaped by China through Mexico with the collusion of the Mexicans. So we need to take matters into our own hands there. The Venezuelan people are suffering. We need to save them from their bad Maduro. Maybe that we could extend this logic into morally imposing some freedom onto Venezuela and overthrowing a bad government that lied. Or what about the poor people in Tibet or Hong Kong? They also need our freedom and support. Well, how about so you got this nudging back towards this crusader ethos that gave rise to so much destruction after 9/11.
Yep.
As well as the Crusades.
And even before that, going back to the John Siglaub, who I wrote about, I mentioned him in the brief, I think today, founding member of the CIA, he's veteran of World War II, and he created the Western Goals Foundation, which went about recruiting all these televangelists and getting all these creating these televangelists like Pat Robertson to raise money for ultimately what became to fund programs like Iran-Contra after Iran-Contra was exposed by Congress, and they shut down the funding for it. So then the CIA just developed these alternative revenue streams, such as televangelists. So all these people giving money to televangelists, thinking they're being do-gooders, that money was actually being used by the CIA to overthrow governments, and all under the the mantra of being a do-gooder and our Christian values. We're gonna impose our Christian values and bring Christ to the far reaches of the world that desperately need us. And that's a very dangerous way of thinking, because ultimately what you're talking about is imposing your will on another population, and who gets to impose that will. And ultimately it ends up being nefarious people almost every single time. So that's where you have to be careful about it. And we're going to talk about this at GART. GART's in 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. We got GART. And so we're going to do a panel on federalism versus anti-federalism. And ultimately, the idea, like, should power be wielded from a strong central place, or should it be disseminated and wielded locally? Like, that was the argument in the 1780s when the Constitution was coming about. So we're going to have that panel discussion. We're also going to do freedom cities and technology. So what you were talking about the future and projects for the future, and building for the next generation, that's going to be a discussion as well. So there's going to be some great panels there. And I sent you before the show, I sent you that speech that Stephen Quast gave, General Stephen Quast, back in 2020, where actually there are people in the audience from the Heritage Foundation who asked him really, really good questions that he answered, which is why I say, don't necessarily judge somebody for being affiliated, judge them by their fruits. Where he talks about that. He talks about how America has lost like its long-term strategic planning that we had back in the day. And because of that, China's eating our lunch because they have that vision where we don't have that vision. And that's why we're going to get destroyed if we don't take space seriously, and Space Force and the economic forces at work or whatever. But it's such a good speech by Quast, and I encourage people to go listen to it. I'll put the link in the chat. Speaking of Quast, I will be interviewing him next Wednesday at 2:00 on this network. So everyone mark your calendar for that. I'm really excited about that discussion. For that reason, we'll probably need to do a pre-record of this show, which you and I can discuss offline. And then we also discussed the Jesuits maybe being the week after that. That might be the Jesuits episode.
Yeah, I think that Cynthia would be good for that. So that'll be probably
yes. It's all whether Cynthia's available. That will definitely need to be a pre-record because I'll be traveling that day to South Dakota.
Right. Okay.
So just giving everyone a lay of the land of the path moving forward. And tonight, actually, I'm going to be on Alpha Warrior's show. He's another Badlander, to discuss just Israel, everything Israel. I've discovered a lot of really interesting connections to organized crime in Ukraine, DOJ documents that absolutely confirm it, the prevalence of organized crime and how it has the tentacles, quote unquote, of the Ukrainian mafia reaching into Tel Aviv in the 1990s, taking over the Likud party, all that good stuff. So, I'll post about that on my X account, like the link to that show. I think we're going to do 10:00 Eastern time. So what about you, Matt? You have anything coming up?
Well, people could tune in on the next episode. I think it's tomorrow. It streams. I did the record on Del Bigtree's High Wire. It was a 45-minute segment on the Mithraic, the ancient occult mystery religion revival on display at the Olympic ceremonies. So we did a deep dive into the French Revolution as a proto Great Reset, and the deeper cult of Isis and Cybele and Mithra that underpinned a lot of the ceremonial imagery. So that's going to be something that people could tune into tomorrow. I believe it streams on the High Wire, and otherwise, there's a new documentary that Cynthia and I just released a brand new documentary on the Arctic as a theater of war or cooperation, which I didn't actually queue up. But next week forget that. People can go to CanadianPatriot.org. We made it freely available. It's about 36 minutes long, going through deep history of how Russia saved the United States, the origins of the Bering Strait rail tunnel plans. It's awesome. How it shaped the next 150 years, including what Trump was trying to do, and I hope can revive again, as far as the Alaska-Canada rail line, which would tie up to some very positive, good visions for the future that could involve transforming our military orientation into something constructive. So that new documentary, we have no plan, like we don't have any commercial ability to market it. So it's purely word of mouth. If people can watch it, share it, we highly appreciate that.
Can you put that link in the comments? Put it in the comments. That way it'll stay up even after the show, even after we shut the show down.
Great idea.
Yeah. Just drop it in the comments. Everyone look for it there. All right. We're going to do rants real quick before we get out of here.
Okay.
Before we do that, if you are listening to the show on record, not live, and you want to make a rant, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv. You then click over here on Support Badlands, and that'll open up this page. You click on Badlands Boost, that'll open up a separate tab, and then you can just do a drop down for Breaking History. So it doesn't look like we have any boosts today, but we do have some rants, so we will hit those real quick. The first rant I had, there was a $10 rant from Counterinsurgent from my BB Netanyahu speech stream that I didn't get to address, which asked me about where did my interest in history in the Middle East come from. Counterinsurgent, I actually cited your name in my write-up on Monday's news brief, and I gave a long explanation for that. So if you're interested in that answer, go read Monday's news brief. But thank you for that question. We now have Sammy the Squirrel, $17. Starting the rants off today to help support this totally awesome show, dude. Appreciate that, Sammy. Really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Roger 5x5, $5. Water, quote unquote, is what a plant, quote unquote, drinks. I.E. comms for information, or for information, quote unquote. Interesting. Good thought. Call sign Cujo, $5. Please join us. Personal live interview with Ghost, August 4th, 2024, Sunday, 9 p.m. Eastern. And then there's the link. Cujo, go ahead and put that link in the comments so that because the chat's going to shut down after we shut the show down. But yes, this Sunday, I am going to do an interview with Cujo, 9 p.m. Eastern time, on his channel. So check that out as well, and I'll make sure I post that on Sunday to Cujo. Let's see if we got any more. Looks like that'll about do it. Let's do one more pass through, make sure that we didn't miss anything. All right. Well, appreciate everybody's support. Matt, any closing thoughts?
I forgot to read the Badlands shop. Should I do that?
Yeah, go ahead and do that, and we'll close it out. And I'll before you do that, I'll just say, because we'll close that after you do that read, hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed the show. Really appreciate that. Gart, virtual tickets are on sale. I believe in-person tickets are also on sale because we can expand the space if we do get more tickets sold. So I don't think there's actually a hard cap like all the other Garts with the in-person ticket sales. But the digital sale tickets are on sale. That's going to be we just kind of formulated the panels, and they're going to be really interesting. So everyone, please, if you're interested, check that out. And with that said, Matt, take it away.
Nice.
In today's fast-paced world, peace of mind is priceless. That's where Badlands Media steps in. Preparing for life's uncertainties is about being ready for anything, right where you are. Welcome to the Badlands Media Shop. We've partnered with Patriot companies offering products that empower you to prepare for any eventuality comfortably from your home. The Badlands Media Shop has everything you need to secure your peace of mind. Browse the virtual aisles. Prepare your family for the year ahead with products you can trust from companies that share your values. Whether it's growing your own food or prepping long-term storage, protecting your family, or stocking up on emergency supplies, we've got you covered. Get prepared. Visit Badlands Media Shop at badlandsmedia.tv/shop today. Every purchase supports a freedom-loving business as well as Badlands Media. That's badlandsmedia.tv/shop. Thank you for your continued support.
All right. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we'll catch you again next week, same time.
Have a good week, guys.